I know that you are legitimately concerned about the historical events underway that are disrupting the world order. The war in Ukraine, which has resulted in nearly 1 million deaths and injuries, continues with the same intensity. The United States of America, our ally, has changed its position on this war, is less supportive of Ukraine and is leaving doubt about what will happen next. At the same time, the same United States of America intends to impose tariffs on products coming from Europe. Finally, the world continues to be ever more brutal and the terrorist threat is not weakening. All in all, our prosperity and security have become more uncertain, and it must be said that we are entering a new era. The war in Ukraine has now been going on for more than 3 years. We decided from day one to support Ukraine and sanction Russia. And we did well. Because it is not only the Ukrainian people who are bravely fighting for their freedom, but it is also our security that is threatened. Indeed, if a country can invade its neighbor in Europe with impunity, then no one can be sure of anything, and it is the law of the strongest that applies, and peace can no longer be guaranteed on our continent itself. History has taught us this. Beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is there and affects the countries of Europe, affects us. Russia has already turned the Ukrainian conflict into a global conflict. It has mobilized North Korean soldiers and Iranian equipment on our continent while helping these countries to arm themselves more. President Putin's Russia violates our borders to assassinate opponents, manipulates elections in Romania and Moldova, and organizes digital attacks against our hospitals to block their operation. Russia is trying to manipulate our opinions with lies spread on social media. And deep down, it tests our limits. It does so in the air, at sea, in space and behind our eyes. This aggressiveness seems to know no boundaries. And Russia, at the same time, continues to rearm, spending more than 40% of its budget for this purpose. By 2030, it plans to further increase its army, to have 300,000 additional soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 300 more fighter jets. Who can believe, in this context, that today's Russia will stop at Ukraine? As I speak to you, Russia has become, and for years to come, a threat to France and to Europe. I regret this very deeply. And I am convinced that in the long term, peace will be made on our continent with a Russia that has once again become peaceful and calm. But the situation I am describing to you is this, and we have to deal with it. So, in the face of this world of danger, it would be madness to remain a spectator. Without further ado, it is a question of taking decisions for Ukraine, for the security of the French people, for the security of Europeans, for Ukraine first and foremost. All initiatives that help peace are a step in the right direction, and I want to salute them this evening. We must continue to help the Ukrainians resist until they can negotiate a solid peace with Russia for themselves and for all of us. This is why the path to peace cannot be through the abandonment of Ukraine, quite the contrary. Peace cannot be concluded at any price and under the Russian dictate. Peace cannot be Ukraine's capitulation, it cannot be its collapse. Nor can it be translated into a ceasefire that would be too fragile. And why? Because here too we have the experience of the past. We cannot forget that Russia began invading Ukraine as early as 2014 and that we negotiated a ceasefire in Minsk. And the same Russia did not respect this ceasefire, and we were not able to maintain the balance for lack of solid guarantees. Today, we can no longer take Russia's word for it. Ukraine has the right to peace and security for itself, and that is in our interest, and it is in the interest of the security of the European continent. It is in this sense that we are working with our British, German and several other European countries. That's why you've seen me in recent weeks gather several of them in Paris and meet them a few days ago in London to consolidate the commitments that Ukraine needs. Once peace is signed, so that Ukraine is not invaded again by Russia, we must prepare for it. This will certainly involve long-term support for the Ukrainian army. This may also involve the deployment of European forces. That would not go to fight today, they would not go to fight on the front line, but on the contrary, they would be there once peace was signed to guarantee full respect for it. Next week, we will bring together in Paris the chiefs of staff of the countries that wish to assume their responsibilities in this regard. It is thus a plan for a solid, lasting, verifiable peace that we have prepared with the Ukrainians and several other European partners and that I was defending in the United States 15 days ago and across Europe. And I want to believe that the United States will remain by our side. But we must be ready if this is not the case. Whether peace in Ukraine is achieved quickly or not, European states must, in view of the Russian threat I have just described, be able to better defend themselves and deter further aggression. Yes, whatever happens, we must equip ourselves more, raise our defensive position, and this for peace itself, to deter. As such, we remain committed to NATO and our partnership with the United States of America. But we need to do more to strengthen our independence in terms of defense and security. The future of Europe does not have to be decided in Washington or Moscow. And yes, the threat is coming back to the East, and the innocence of the last 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall is now over. In Brussels tomorrow, at the Extraordinary Council meeting of the 27 heads of state and government with the Commission and the President in office of the Council, we will take decisive steps. Several decisions will be taken that France has been proposing for several years. Member states will be able to increase their military spending without this being taken into account in their deficits. Massive joint funding will be decided to buy and produce on European soil some of the most innovative ammunition, tanks, weapons and equipment. I have asked the government to be mobilized so that, on the one hand, this strengthens our armed forces as quickly as possible and, on the other hand, it accelerates reindustrialization in all our regions. And I will meet with the competent ministers and the sector's industrialists in the coming days. The European defense, which we have been defending for 8 years, is therefore becoming a reality. This means European countries that are more ready to defend and protect themselves, that together produce the equipment they need on their soil, that are ready to cooperate more to reduce their dependence on the rest of the world. And that's a good thing. Germany, Poland, Denmark, the Baltic states and many of our partners have announced unprecedented efforts in terms of military spending. So in this time of action that is finally opening, France has a special status. We have the most effective army in Europe, and thanks to the choices made by our elders after the Second World War, we have nuclear deterrent capabilities. They protect us much more than many of our neighbors. And moreover, we did not wait for the invasion of Ukraine to see a worrying world. And through the 2 military programming laws that I have decided and that successive parliaments have passed, we will have doubled the budget of our armed forces in almost 10 years. But given the evolution of the threats, this acceleration that I have just described, we will have to make new budgetary choices and additional investments that have now become essential. I have asked the government to work on it as quickly as possible. These will be new investments that require the mobilization of private financing but also public financing without increasing taxes. For this to happen, we will need reforms, choices, courage. Our nuclear deterrent protects us. It is complete, sovereign, French from start to finish. Since 1964, it has always explicitly played a role in the preservation of peace and security in Europe. But responding to the historic call of the future German Chancellor, I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection of our allies on the European continent through our deterrence. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, head of the armed forces. To control our destiny, to become more independent, we must work on this both militarily and economically. Yes, economic, technological, industrial and financial independence are necessities. We must also be prepared for the United States to decide on tariffs on European goods, as it has just confirmed against Canada and Mexico. This decision, which is incomprehensible to both the American economy and ours, will have consequences for some of our sectors. It increases the difficulty of the moment, but it will not go unanswered on our part. So, while preparing the response with our European colleagues, we will continue, as I did 15 days ago, to try everything to convince people that this decision would hurt us all. And I hope, yes, to convince and dissuade the President of the United States of America. All in all, the moment demands unprecedented decisions for many decades. On our agriculture, our research, our industry, on all our public policies, we cannot have the same debates as we have been saying before. This is why I have asked the Prime Minister and his government, and I invite all the political, economic and trade union forces in the country, alongside them, to make proposals in the light of this new context. Tomorrow's solutions cannot be yesterday's habits. My fellow citizens, in the face of these challenges and irreversible changes, we must not proceed to any excess, neither the excess of the ships at war, nor the excess of the defeatists. In the face of these challenges and irreversible changes, we must not proceed to any excess, neither the excess of the ships at war, nor the excess of the defeatists. We must not proceed to any excess, neither the excess of the ships at war, nor the excess of the defeatists. Nor the excess of the defeatists. France will follow only one course, that of the will for peace and freedom, faithful to its history and its principles. Yes, that's what we believe in, for our security. But that's what we believe in. We also believe, in order to defend democracy, a certain idea of truth, a certain idea of free research, of respect in our societies, a certain idea of freedom of expression which is not the return of hate speech, basically a certain idea of humanism. We also believe, in order to defend democracy, a certain idea of truth, a certain idea of free research, of respect in our societies, a certain idea of freedom of expression which is not the return of hate speech, basically a certain idea of humanism. This is what we carry and what is at stake. Our Europe has the economic strength, the power and the talent to be equal to this era, and whether we compare ourselves to the United States of America and a fortiori to Russia, we have the means to do so. We must therefore act as Europeans and determined to protect ourselves. This is why the homeland needs you, your commitment. Political decisions, military equipment, budgets are one thing, but they will never replace the fortitude of a nation. Our generation will no longer receive the dividends of peace. It is up to us to ensure that our children reap the dividends of our commitments